First, Liverpool. Here's what we know, and then I'll tell you what I think. We know that at 10:59 a.m., just prior to the minute's silence observed throughout the land on Remembrance Sunday, a car exploded outside the door of the Women's Hospital in the great city of Liverpool. We know that one person is dead. We know that that person is the passenger who was sat in the back seat. We know that the taxi driver has survived because he was able to tumble out of his door before the car was engulfed in flames. We know that the counter-terrorism squad is leading the investigation. Here's what I think. I think that the passenger was a woman. I think the passenger fully intended going into the hospital. Somehow, the explosion happened before the passenger, whom I believe to be a woman, was able to go in there. I've been criticized on social media by journalists for not waiting for the police official statement. I bet those journalists don't get many scoops. I've got my own sources of information in Liverpool, and I believe that there's every reason to suspect this was a terrorist attack aimed at Britain on possibly the most sacred day at the most sacred hour in our national life, when even the cynical, even those who oppose all wars, pause to remember those that fell. I do. Most of you in Britain almost certainly do also. We lament the fallen in the Second World War who died defending liberty, repelling fascism, saving the world from a fate almost unimaginable, in which every Jew in the world would have been annihilated, every gypsy, every gay person, every disabled person, every communist, every socialist, every Jehovah's Witness, anyone who would not succumb to the iron heel of Hitler fascism, Mussolini fascism, Tojo fascism would have been eliminated. And if our heroes, and above all the Russian heroes, and the other heroes from the other Soviet republics in the Red Army, which inflicted 79% of all casualties suffered by the Wehrmacht in the Second World War, the heroes that came from the United States of America in 1944 and landed on Omaha Beach in Normandy as the liberation of Western Europe began. If those heroes had not done so, I'd be speaking to you tonight in German, and my name would probably be Fritz or Erhard. But of course, I wouldn't be speaking to you at all, because under fascism, no such program as this Open University of the Airwaves could possibly have been tolerated. I'd be speaking to you, if I was at all even alive, to a script dictated by fascist Gauleiters who'd be sitting behind the glass now, ready to shoot me if I departed from the script. That's how big the stakes were. And anyone who does not respect those that gave their lives fighting fascism in the Second World War, in my opinion, deserves unalloyed contempt. We remember also those that fell in wars into which they were fooled, into which they were tricked by their rulers, wars which were unnecessary, wars which were ignoble. But that's hardly the fault of Tommy Atkins, who was conscripted and sent to fight in them. And so this day and that hour of 11 a.m. is sacred indeed. And if my speculation is right, that some terrorists sought to desecrate it with mass murder, then the plot thickens. We have, let me tell you, there's breaking news. We're now hearing that 3 men have been arrested under the Terrorism Act after one person was killed in a car explosion outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital. So, hey, Mr. Journalist, my sources were better than yours. I was right, and once again, you were wrong. The point, though, is, isn't it, that Britain is embroiled in a war against Islamist, fanatic, extremist terrorism. ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the alphabet soup of similar organizations are active and intend to harm as many of us. Even women in the women's hospital, a maternity hospital, are ready to harm, maim, murder any of us that they can to serve their evil purpose. Now, I use that as a segue into the next painful part of my monologue. I've been assailed by Trotskyites and liberals and anarchists and no doubt supporters of the most blue-blooded free market capitalism, all of whom have one thing at least in common: they don't believe in borders. They believe that the solution to the problem of Afghanistan is for Afghanistan to move here. The problem of Kurdistan to be solved by Kurdistan moving here. We have an existential threat in the landing of thousands of people every single week about whom none of us know anything at all, except this: the vast majority of them are men. The vast majority of those men are young men of fighting age, and they are arriving in rubber dinghies facilitated by the government of France, by the security forces of France, who turn a Nelson's eye, if they'll forgive me, to the fact that thousands of people are illegally leaving their country every week and landing equally illegally on our territory. Now, the liberals and the Trotskyites want to hang up banners saying refugees welcome. Well, not me. Because whilst every country, and ours more than almost any other, have a legal and moral responsibility to accept the refugees who are fleeing from genuine war and destruction caused by us, that's not a blank check for anyone and everyone to arrive and then disperse into the local population here because we are at war with terrorism right now, in plain sight. Mass murder was just narrowly averted, presumably, by a premature explosion in Liverpool today. Umpteen acts of mass murder have been planned and some executed in Britain over these last years. Of course, nobody needs to tell me what Britain did to help fuel this extremism, this fanaticism. I'm the last person you need to lecture about that for reasons which anyone who knows me already knows. But it's my duty now, as a political figure in Britain, to defend our island and our people from nihilistic terrorist acts which seek to punish innocent people for the crimes of guilty people. A crime in any jurisdiction, a sin in any religion. But the political class appear to think that by pulling the duvet over their heads and not talking about this, that somehow the problem will go away. Worse than that, Britain has sent armed forces to Poland to repel a group of refugees on the Belarusian border, smaller in number than the number that landed in one day in Britain from France last week. Imagine. We're defending the EU's border in Poland, but can't defend our own border in the United Kingdom from illegal people trafficking from the EU, from France. You couldn't make it up. But Boris Johnson has nothing to say about it. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, sometimes says something about it, but never does anything about it. They blame the French. Just as well Mr. Churchill didn't do that in 1940. He could have blamed the French and all the other European armies that folded like cheap deck chairs in a matter of hours in the teeth of the Wehrmacht's advance. But he had no time to blame France. It was his job to defend Britain. But nobody is defending Britain now. And if anything, the posture of the Trotskyites and liberals and free market capitalists in the so-called Labour Party is even worse on the matter than that of Her Majesty's government. Which allows me to segue to General Sir Nick Carter. Assailed as we are by Islamist fanatic terrorism, he chose Remembrance Sunday to pronounce that Britain must get ready for war with Russia. Russia, almost as if he didn't know that any war with Russia would leave the entire island of Great Britain a smoking, radioactive pile of ash, and every person living in it would be dead. That's what General Sir Nick Carter says that we have to get ready for. Now, maybe he doesn't mean it, but the Russians have no reason to trust that. After all, it's exactly 100 years ago since we last invaded Russia. Hundreds of thousands of our soldiers invaded Russia 100 years ago only. There are people alive today in Russia that were alive when we last invaded them. So now we have the Russian people being told on this day of all days that we've got to get ready for war with our former ally, without whom we'd all be speaking in German. It is simply intolerable that these masters of war, these dogs of war, can ceaselessly bark and threaten countries like Russia, like China, who are exponentially more powerful than them. Maybe they're threatening Russia with America's army, just like Mussolini used to threaten people with Hitler's army. This is intolerable. If we tolerate it, we may very well find that we are on a slippery slope to war, the last war, the war to end all wars, because there'll be nobody left alive to fight the next one. The aforementioned Boris Johnson has now slipped behind Keir Starmer in the public opinion polls. You wouldn't believe that that was possible. It's like somebody telling you that Laurel and Hardy have streaked ahead of you in a foot race. It is almost impossible to believe that this block of wood, so wooden the birds are nesting in him, is now, in one case, 6 points ahead of a Tory government with an 80-seat majority. Whilst Boris Johnson, unlike David Cameron, who only hugged a husky, has actually zipped himself in to a polar bear suit, gone green, gone gaga, threatening us all with environmental perdition unless we pony up thousands of pounds, scrap our boilers, scrap our cars, go cold, shower cold, eat cold dinners. He's lost control of the borders. He doesn't want you to notice. So he wants to terrify you with environmental perdition instead. All the talk at Westminster is that Boris Johnson is not much longer for this political world. We have a poll running now about who will be the next Conservative leader. And finally, in the moment or so left to me, Her Majesty the Queen was missing today on Remembrance Sunday, which she has religiously attended throughout her long reign. There is speculation that this 94-year-old lady is more seriously ill than the media are telling us, than the political class are telling us. I put my cards on the table. I wish her even longer life than she has enjoyed. I wish her no harm at all. I respect the efforts that she has made as the longest-serving British head of state. It would be unbecoming not to. An old lady who recently lost her husband. But I will not myself accept Prince Charles as the head of state of this country upon her demise, which I say, I hope is long in the future. I think that Prince Charles would be a disaster for British democracy and for British public life in general, for reasons I'm more than happy to adumbrate. In my view, if the monarchy had any sense, Charles would abdicate the moment that he became king and pass it on to his elder son, Prince William. But I am determined, upon the passing of Her Majesty the Queen, to campaign for a grown-up republic in Britain, because I believe it is demeaning to a country like ours in the almost end of the first quarter of the 21st century to be ruled by the rules of primogeniture, where you have no say, and where, if you're unlucky, you might get a gibbering idiot as your head of state. That's my monologue. The rest is up to you. This is the mother of old talk shows.